Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. This week I'm going to talk about the recently spoiled dual deck of Merfolk versus Goblins. This was accidentally spoiled by Wizards on their French site. They've taken it down, but people were able to grab the list before they took it down, and I've loaded it up on MTG Goldfish so we can analyze the value of the decks as well as see what's in the decks and see any potential specs that are missed in the deck that you can invest in, because of course whenever more cards are entered into the supply, the cards that are not, that have the same, go in the same sort of deck, so think of Merfolk in Modern or Goblins in Modern or EDH decks or casual decks that will want to pick up some of these pieces to make their Merfolk or Goblin decks better, are going to go up in value. Because there will be more demand for them. But also this video is going to be a sort of a bit of a rant video, because I'm actually a little bit upset with myself that I haven't seen this pattern earlier, and it's burned me a ton in the recent, not so recent past, and I think I need to change my investment strategies based upon this obvious pattern with Wizards of the Coast and their reluctancy to print older cards in these dual decks. And it seems like, I would even say Return to Ravnica forward, they're a lot more likely to print cards that existed in that time period than they are to go back. And we'll see, I'll show you this in a few examples, because there are similar cards for slots, and it seems like they always pick the newer card. And I'm going to show you that seems to be the case in Commander and other box sets. Rather than go into the kind of the very deep pool of Magic the Gathering cards, they always seem to pick from these, I would say, RTR forward. And it's burned me a lot in the past investing on cards that I thought weren't going to be reprinted. There's no way, because they're too new, and they just reprint them and reprint them and reprint them and reprint them, when I would say other cards that needed a reprint are passed over time and time again. So there's that going for you. I know there's been some articles written about it that this is on purpose so that Wizards can use them for Iconic and Eternal Masters type sets, but we just saw Iconic Masters skip over a lot of older cards in favor of these newer cards that I would even say did not need a reprint. So let's just look over the decks. And again, it's maybe a lot of it's just my own frustration, because one of my spec cards got another reprint, and so I'm screwed out of the money there that I absolutely thought would not be in this deck, because it just seems like too much of a powerhouse versus the Goblins deck, and that is the Master of Waves. So it seems like they picked one mythic for each of the decks, and they went with the Master of Waves. And it's kind of frustrating too that Wizards, it's like they won't print cards that are like they don't care about rarity. If there's a bulk mythic, they'll easily put it in a box set, which is kind of frustrating to me, because I don't think that Wizards, either A, they should be doing that they should be finding something that needs a reprint based upon price, or B, they should be basically out of sight, out of mind. They shouldn't worry about the secondary market when they print a box set. Now, I know, like Tony Community College in the past, we've gone back and forth on this, where he says, well, if they put something in this set that was expensive, like for example, they put a Mutavault or a dual land, for example, in this set, then all the speculators would just buy them up and the casual players would not have any. That could happen, but I don't know if that's the best argument, because eventually it would just show a huge sign to the speculators, hey, we're willing to reprint anything. You better be careful with your speculations. And I don't think they can really control the supply of local game stores and Walmart as much as they think they can. Like, a lot of these, especially these type of decks, go right to the consumer very quickly, and there isn't like time for a lot of speculators to buy them all up. And again, it's not that profitable if they were to choose if they were to make the full value of this deck go up by what, $10 or $15. I don't think that will change the speculator's perception of if they're going to buy it or not. So anyway, so Master Waves is disappointing to me personally, because I have been slowly investing in these since the rotation of Theros. I own a ton of them, and I really did not think it was going to be reprinted in this deck, because of just what a powerhouse it was against Goblins. If you get this card out against Goblins, it can be extremely hard, if you look over the list, for the Goblins to beat the Master of Waves. And it doesn't seem like the Goblins have a trump card anywhere near the Master Waves in their list. So another one that was very disappointing, of course, is the Tidebinder Mage. This is a card that I've been speccing into very, very highly. It got outclassed by the Harbinger of Tides, which is also in this list, which is the card I was also investing in, which just got a double reprint. And that's something that Wizards has been doing a ton of lately, is the double, triple reprints. What I mean by that is a card, they'll throw it in a commander set, then immediately reprint it in a dual deck or something like that. We've seen it with many cards. What was it? Like Coiling Oracle was a card that was just reprinted right in a row. Like it was like Modern Masters, and then they had it in the dual deck, then they had it in one of the Masters series, and they had it in a commander or something like that. And it just it went from like a worthwhile card to throw out of the bulk bin, out of the commons, to then it's just been printed so many times that you got to think of it more like a Tormenting Voice. Tormenting Voice is the perfect card that I consider I throw in my bulk bins, because I don't think that no matter how much demand Tormenting Voice receives, the supply will always outstretch the demand, naturalize another card, Negate. Negate's actually one of the top cards played in Standard at the moment, and there's no way that Negates will ever hold value just because of the sheer amount of times that they've been reprinted. So unfortunately, this happens to a lot of cards. I think the Harbinger of Tides is now to the point of no return. It's not investable, which I have over 300 copies of this card, and it was back when I had the information I had, I still think it was a great spec card, as it was rotating out of Origins. It was at its all-time low. It sees plays of 3 of and 4 ofs in Merfolk deck, which has been a steady tier 2, tier 3 deck from the existence of Modern. And then wham wham, gets reprinted in Commander and now in Dual Deck, and it's just going to take years, if ever, that it's ever going to go up in value by the time they reprint it again. So unfortunately, I think that Wizards is very susceptible to their almost what I like to call a feedback loop. They'll print something, and then people will play it, and they're like, oh, people like this, so they'll print it again. And we'll show that in Commander why Commander's kind of become like what I like to call inbred. Their own data is kind of messing with their it's kind of messing with their choices of printing it again, because like, wow, this card's popular, people are playing it like crazy, let's print it again in another Commander set. And the only reason it's seeing tons of play in Commander to begin with is people play the pre-constructed decks like crazy, so it's like, oh, this card sees a lot of play, we'll reprint it. Oh, it's still seeing a lot of play, let's reprint it. And it happens over and over and over again, and Commander is getting terrible with that. There's a lot of Commander players that I know that absolutely hate the box sets, because it's kind of ruined what Commander used to be, which used to be a format which was very creative. You went and found cards to put in your deck, and now these pre-con decks have just been so streamlined, so they're already very synergistic and have just packed full of value, that there's no incentive for people to go out and build decks from scratch. So anyway, let's go back to the topic at hand and not talk about the woes of my missteps here in kind of specking in the cards, and see what this deck has to offer. I have a lot of complaints off the bat, because again, if they were going to look at, if rarity wasn't the case, then they could have easily put a better mythic than Master of Waves. It was more fair. I mean, it's a great card in this deck. It's a bomb card in this deck versus Goblins, but I think that they could have found a better place for this. So let's just go down the list. We have a Tidal Warrior. We have a Harbinger of the Tides. Let's just look at the cards that are worth any sort of value. We have the Master Pearl Triad. This one was great. A lot of people are saying Lord of Atlantis was a better print here, but I think Master of the Pearl Trident's better because it was more expensive to begin with than Lord of Atlantis. And the supply is actually, I believe, a little bit lower, because Lord of Atlantis was printed many times through the early sets of the core sets, and also had a reprint in Time Spiral, whereas Master of Pearl Trident only had the one print, and it's been steadily going up and up and up and up in value. So I think that for accessibility for Merfolk, Master of the Pearl Trident's a card that needed reprint. Also, Wizards is a little very reluctant to print cards that have difficult wording on them. And with that being, its Lord of Atlantis was the card that gave all Merfolk +1/+1. So it wasn't just other Merfolk you controlled. So it's all Merfolk. Each player's Merfolk get +1/+1. So Wizards went away from things that affected your opponent's boards positively. Back, I would say, yeah, this Master Pearl Trident was the time they really started doing that. So let's go down to the Tidebinder Mage. Again, this is going to kill the price of Tidebinder Mage. The Cold-Eyed Selkie. Here's a perfect example. This card I don't really think fits in the deck, because it's very, very confusing why the green card is in a blue deck. And I think that, yes, you can cast it for blue, But if they were going to make it, I really thought it was going to be a green-blue deck versus a black-red deck. And that Goblins were going to have more of a mad anti feel to it, not just a mono red. And same thing with this, especially with Merfolk coming out of the new set of Ixalan. I thought it was going to use a lot more Ixalan cards. And there's very, very few cards, if any, right, that are used in this, which is really, really surprising because a lot of times their dual decks do showcase their latest set. Think of Oblivion Sower for the dual deck, and even the time before that with the Eldritch Moon, they showcased a lot of cards from the new set, and this one doesn't have. I'll have to look over it to see if it even has any. So it's kind of awkward that they went that route and didn't go, the multicolored mono blue versus mono red, but included a blue-green card in here. Selkie would have been a great reprint again. It's just been reprinted too many times in the not-so-distant past that it kind of feels like a wasted slot, other than it does have the Island Walk to it, and they do want Island Walk with the amount of the Aquitects Will, which again, I think Aquitects Will is kind of a weird card to print when the Spreading Seas would have been a better choice, but we'll get down to that. The Merfolk Sovereign was a good lord to put in here because here if they are worried about price and power level, this is a 3-drop one, so they can go with the Master Pearl Trident right into the Merfolk Sovereign. I'm perfectly okay with that because they also have the Merrow Reejerey, which I think was a great reprint because it's uncommon. So I think they could have actually put a few more of these. And so they do have 3 lores that they've spread out. So I think that was a win on this one. They got one of the reprints that needed to be reprinted, and this will elevate the price of the Merrow Reejerey, other than a lot of the Merfolk decks in Modern don't even play it. There are some that like to go the Reejerey because it's very powerful with the Vial, as you can keep on tapping the Vial and throwing more Merfolk into play, and it really helps you kind of explode with the Merfolk and go lethal as quickly as possible. But some players like to just go as heavy on the 2-drops. We'll look at Merfolk decks in Modern here in a second and show which ones actually see play. We have a few awkward at the common and uncommon slots. We have a Wake Thrasher. When a permanent you control becomes untapped, it gets +1/+1 in the turn. This just seems so out of place, other than it does, after at the beginning of your untap phase, this does work, and then it can actually swing in maybe for lethal, but it just seems very out of place. They could have used their rare slot better than this, or like this is a card that I think could go in some sort of untapped theme. If in the future if they ever did like an Inspire mechanic or something, this would work out better. And of course, Master of Ways was a very, very good, solid power card in here, but I think it's just too powerful for this dual deck. And again, they could have used their Mythic maybe for like an Aether Vial, where it needs a huge reprint here. And I know Aether Vial is coming out in Iconic Masters, and we have the argument that if it's in here, then people just buy it up for the Aether Vial. But I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. And then we have some older uncommons too. This one's actually pretty good for the theme deck because it comes into play. Look at the top 4 cards that I put on Merfolk revealed that way. And this I think was a slam dunk to put in it. We also have the Inkfathom Diver with the high converted mana cost, which is very, very awkward. It just is I think they're just looking for Merfolk that Island Walk, but this one's a very, very weak one, which again, you're gonna have to put some filler in here. So what is it missing as far as creatures are concerned? First of all, it's missing the Curse Catcher and the Silvergill Adept. That is the biggest scratch. It makes you scratch your head. Why both Curse Catcher? In fact, you can see that they have stuff like Misdirection in here in the sideboard. So the Merfolk want some sort of protection against spells. Curse Catcher would have been the perfect card. It's a common. It's a common that's worth a ton of money. Silvergill Adept, same thing. It's if you control a Merfolk or reveal a Merfolk, you draw a card. Would have worked perfectly to put those in multiples in this deck. They're uncommons and commons that need a reprint, and would have allowed people to have more accessibility to the Modern deck. And rather than kind of throwing in these wasted cards, like the Tidal Warrior, I understand why they put it in here to make things have make things islands so you can island walk in. But at the same time, I think that Silvergill and Curse Catcher, of course, were huge misses for this deck. The Aquitects Will is fine. It's if you control a Merfolk, you draw a card, so it can be a little bit quicker than the Spreading Seas. But Spreading Seas is the card that needed a reprint. They needed to adjust the price down, and there's not a lot of options for these cards to get reprints. You have per year. There's only a matter of how many supplemental products you can put into the field. And if it's Wizards' goal to keep the commons and uncommons down, they need to use all of those options correctly. And I hate to see it when they just throw it in a set that has no synergy. And so if they throw Spreading Season like a Iconic Masters, for example, and there's little to no island walk in the set, which we saw with Daybreak Coronet in Modern Masters 2015, where it just was so out of place that it just became a kind of an embarrassing rare to put in that set. If there's no point, people would last pick it in draft if that it was that bad. All right, so anyway, we get some again. Triton Tactics might have been better for a curse capture here because they both do very similar things of protecting the lords. And Essence Scatter's fine; those of course are good things to throw in. And then we have some very awkward rares again in the form of like Mind Spring, which I think is just out of place, and Misdirection. And Engulf the Shores is okay. This one's fine. It has kind of the Merfolk theme. But again, it's something that, I don't know. I think they could have used their rare slots a little more appropriately. Claustrophobia seems way out of place because if they're going to print something like Master Waves that affects, and Tidebinder Mage that affects red or green cards, they might have well used the one out of Dragon's Dark here that affects red and green cards and taps down creatures. So Claustrophobia is kind of awkward. The lands, I've been a huge proponent that they should be printing lands that are useful. That's one of the problems with Modern, is the mana base, and it's just a shame that Immutavault was not printed in this set. I think that both decks wanted it. If you're about mix and matching the decks, I'd maybe print 2 Mutavaults in either one. Again, they're expensive cards, but the only reason it has had a recent reprint. And I mean, as far as rarity is concerned, if they're going off of rarity, I mean, Mutavault's what? The M14, so M13 was printed in here as a rare, as a very chase card. Mutavault, I think, could have easily been put in, and then it would have put up the value of these and actually made this a slam dunk pickup. So anyway, let's go over to the Goblins. The Goblins makes me kind of shake my head too, because I think there would be better reprints, especially some of the older cards for Goblin tribal-based decks. Krenko gets yet another reprint, which is okay because Krenko is a casual favorite. I think it's the most played mono-colored commander, according to EDH Rec. So a lot of people love this card, and it's a very, very powerful commander, very, very popular, and very, very popular in just tribal casual decks for the Krenko Mob Boss. It has seen some Legacy play in Legacy Goblins, but Legacy Goblins hasn't seen play in a long time. So anyway, so Foundry Street Denizen is the common. That one's perfect. We have like Glory Chaser, which is great. They didn't add the new Goblin Pirate, though, here, which would have been perfect here. And let's just go down the Warren Instigator. This, I think, would be a slam dunk, other than I think that Goblin Lackey would have been a better choice. They do very similar things. Of course, the Instigator is Lackey on crack. It does double strike, right? Let's look at the Lackey again, or the Instigator. So it says whenever an Instigator deals damage to opponent, you may put a Goblin creature card from your hand on the battlefield, so it hits twice, and you can put 2 Goblins into play, whereas the Lackey is just 1. But I think that this one is the card that needed a reprint. It's an uncommon, $7 uncommon, without a new border, or does it have the new border with, I guess, from the Vault Exiled, but without the new border, and I think it's more powerful because it's the 1-drop that comes in. It sees more play than the Instigator for sure, and not on the reserve list, so it needs to be reprinted. A $7 uncommon goes against kind of the philosophy of Magic, where they want to keep the uncommons and commons accessible, and this is anything but accessible. The supply is very, very low with it. I'm okay with either. Maybe they should have just put both in here on the uncommon slot and the Instigator. We have the next rare slot that we have is going to be the Chieftain, and the Chieftain's fine here. I think the Chieftain is the Lord that Goblins absolutely do want. Yeah, the haste and +1/+1 because it does work with the Krenko. Rabble Master is good here. Is this the first reprint from Rabble Master? This is a card that was going to need a reprint. I would assume it was going up in value. It's going back down again. But it's starting to see a ton of play in Modern in a very similar deck to either, I would say, Jund or 8-Rack. What it tries to do is Thoughtseize and Inquisition. So more like Death Shadow is what the deck that they're. Let's just take a look at this deck really quickly. The Rabble Master seeing. Apologize for the sniffling too. I have a cold right now, and right when I started recording this video, the symptoms started to go crazy. But yeah, it's trying to get Goblin Rabble Master out, and this one's not. This is like just a mono red list. like a Scred type list. The one I was, see if we can find the other list here. Nope, this is the same guy. But, oh, this is vintage. I clicked on a vintage deck. So Goblin Rabblemaster in vintage. Let's see. Yeah, so here's a Goblin Rabblemaster. This one doesn't use it. The one I was looking at, they were using Pack Rat and Goblin Rabblemaster, and then like Thoughtseiz's Inquisition, Lightning Bolt, Terminate, Kolaghan's Command, and just ripping out your opponent's hand. And then if you practically take care of the answer for the Rabblemaster, this card can get out of control. So I do like the reprinting of Goblin Rabblemaster in this deck. I think it's solid. Other than it is sort of a newer card in 15. The supply is very high of this. The accessibility to picking up this card is very high, and yeah, so I don't know if it necessarily needed a reprint here. Some of these older cards are fine, but this is Goblin Mutant's very, very awkward here in this slot, in the rare slot. And I think Battle Squadron could have been easily a Goblin. I guess the Goblin the Goblin Siege Gang Commander already had a reprint recently. Ringleaders were fine for the uncommon slot. When it comes into play, reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put all Goblins cards into your hand, rest on the bottom. So you got the one from the Merfolk and the one from Goblins. Very, very good. I like that fact. We do seem pretty low on creatures for this deck, but we do have Krenko's Command that is a creature, basically. And this was the one that did need the reprint rather than Dragon Fodder. Dragon Fodder has been reprinted a bazillion times. There's also Hordeling Outburst. A Relentless Assault as the bulk rare, but it's actually a good bulk rare that sees a decent amount of EDH play. And like the Grenade and Tarfire, perfect cards to throw in this deck. Tarfire did need a reprint because this is started to see a ton of play in the Death Shadow Tarmogoyf type decks where card types matter. And Brute Strength's kind of awkward in here. I think there could have been something better in this slot because it's not really what Goblins want to be doing is pumping up. Go wide never once. I mean, this could have been the Dyna Charge. I think would have been a lot better for this deck rather than a single target gets +1/+1. But all in all, this one I think is a pretty good deck, other than we get to Brittle Effigy, which they did give you a way to get rid of the Master of Waves, so I guess kudos to them. But it's just kind of out of place in a swarm deck that wants to overwhelm. Both of the decks are trying to kind of swarm. One's trying to be evasive, one's trying to just go like wider than the other one. And so this one's kind of out of place, and the Charbelcher also can kill the Master of Waves. But I think they just kind of threw this in because it said Goblin on it, but it's a very mana-intensive card in a deck that otherwise doesn't want to have a lot of mana intensivity in it. And again, I think it's kind of awkward here that they've chosen the lands that they've chosen. This could have easily been a land. They could have put a Valakut in here, for example, and that would have been a good use for the land slot. With a card that desperately did need to be reprinted. So all in all, I think that investing in cards M15 or Return to Ravnica Forward is getting a lot more volatile. They've seen their willingness to just reprint cards over and over. Krenko Mob Boss is a good example. Even though the supply is very, very great here. So let's just check about a few of the could-haves. So let's just look at Modern Merfolk. Again, I talked about how Silvergill Adept, that definitely should have been in the deck. Should you invest in these? We do still have unknown cards out of the Explorer's Vixalan, where either of these could get hit, the Curse Catcher and the Silvergill Adept, but I think these are both investable. The Lord of Atlantis, I think, would be the card that you should be investing in because it has not seen a reprint since when? When was the last time? Time Shifted is the last time. 7th edition, 6th edition, 3rd edition. Yeah, I think it's a pretty decent card because the Master is going to get the reprint and everyone will need to pick up the Lords. So it's got that going for it. Spreading Seas. This could finally, it's a common though, so I usually don't like to reprint in commons, but this was the set where it should have been reprinted. Now that it's not being reprinted, excuse me, it's probably a perfect pickup. And Mutavault. Mutavault's another card that missed a huge opportunity for a reprint, and this card's just going to spike up in value because how many casual players that pick this up? I'm like, well, I've got the pieces starting for a Merfolk deck. I'm just going to start going for Merfolk, and you can already see the trajectory for the Mutavault has been quite aggressive here. It's been going up a ton since its bottom of being $10.50. So yeah, this is a great little. When was that? We're less than a year. So the start of the year is when it bottomed out. So we're in October here. So 10 months later, it's had a 30% increase. That's quite good out of a card, and I think that these dual decks will definitely accelerate it. So those would be my picks based upon the information we have to invest in the Merfolk out of the Merfolk dual deck, because inevitably, again, this is going to bring people into the archetype. All right, so Goblins hasn't seen a play for quite a while in Modern. It's viable. A lot of the Goblins go around the 8-rack strategy. Or not 8-rack, 8-whack strategy. So the Reckless Bushwhacker and the Goblin Bushwhacker. And then the Goblin Guide, which I think should have been reprinted that would have been a 1-drop rare that they shouldn't have worried about the price of a card and thrown it in here, rather than wasted on some of these other rares like a Charbelcher or something like that. The Goblin Guide is something I think is very investable now from the Goblin Tribal. So let's just look at Goblin Tribal, though, of some of the other cards that should have seen play. It's kind of awkward they didn't put a Vanquisher's Banner, a Coat of Arms, a Door of Destinies, an Obelisk of Erd in either one of these decks. I think instead of like a Goblin Charbelcher, that would have been a better use. There's also some Goblin cards from back in the day that I think would work better for the list. We have so the Chieftain got a reprint, the King did not. Goblin Recruiter did not get a reprint in this one, but they did have a very similar card to that, so I'm okay with that. There was no Impact Tremors in this deck. Impact Tremors, I think that's crazy. The common out of Dragon Tarkir is already selling on Card Kingdom for 40 cents a piece. The cards that I think that people will pick up, Purphoros is another bump in Purphoros' price. I've been all in on Purphoros for quite a while because I think gods are a little bit harder to reprint. Same thing with Legendary, Enchantment, God. All of those I think are very, very tough. Mog War Marshal was not reprinted, other than it's had enough reprintings. I don't think it's going to affect the price. And again, like cards like Coat of Arms are definitely going to go up in value. Legion Loyalist, I think, would have been a great 1-drop rare to print. So they neither did Goblin Guide, Legion Loyalist, nor the Goblin Lackey, which I think was a huge miss. And we could also get another spike in Metallic Mimic. Here's another one that I was surprised that it wasn't thrown in, because usually these dual decks do have a compromise of at least some cards from the recent sets, and there just wasn't a lot, if any, in this dual deck. The Bushwhacker wasn't reprinted. I think the price of this will go back up. Very surprising as well in a Swarm strategy where neither the Reckless nor the Goblin Bushwhacker got a reprint. And yeah, I think those are the standout cards that were just plain missed. The Adapted Automaton is getting a reprint in the Explorers of Ixalan, but it's surprising that it wasn't included in either one of these decks. I mean, one of the things that they used to do in the past is allowed you to kind of mix and match the decks. And this one, so any sort of Metallic Mimic or Adaptive Automaton or even Bronze, the Bronze Golem, or Coat of Arms or a Door of Destinies or Obelisk of Erd, none of those were included, which is very, very surprising. So anyway, I think you should go over these lists and just check to see any opportune cards. This is just looking up cards that are included in Krenko. You can also look at 8-whack decks. I think actually 8-whack decks are very, very good in Modern at the moment, because there's a lack of removal spells in Modern at the moment that, let's just check out. I'm going to show you. So let's just go ahead and look at the format staples for Modern. And you can see that most of the cards, Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt, Path to Exile, are a lot of these 1-for-1 cards. Collective Brutality, again, is more of a 1-for-1 card. And the lack of like Golgari Charms, the lack of Pyroclasms, the lack of what's some other cards people have used, even the Maelstrom Pulses, all of those cards are leaving it wide open for a go-wide strategy that hasn't been played in quite some time in Modern. So, I mean, if you even look up Reckless Bushwhacker, see if we can find a Goblin deck that's even been played in quite some time in Modern. And it doesn't appear. All these are zoo-based decks. What's another one that would be would definitely be Goblins only? So Goblin Pile Driver? No, they don't use that one. It's Goblin War Chief. Goblin Grenade. That'll find it if we find one. Grenade is usually used in the modern. So here's an 8-whack strategy. This one's kind of weird with Goblin Grenade because of the lack of goblins here. But yeah, kind of crazy. Haven't seen a goblin-based deck in modern for quite some time. They're fast. They can kill on turn 3, turn 4 quite easily. And again, with the go wide strategy with a lot of Death Shadow, it's surprising that no one's tried this. Maybe there is enough Lingering Souls hate out there that's still kind of stopping the goblin strategy from working. I actually think the new Dinosaur works well with goblins, the one that says they can't gain life, because it is more of a creature-based deck, so you don't want skull cracks. You actually want creatures to work well with it, and the new goblin, I think, or the new Dinosaur, I think, is playable. Anyway, we're getting off course here with the topic. The last thing I want to talk about, though, is what I like to call the feedback loop. If you go over to EDHREC and look at the top 100 cards, what ends up happening is you can find very, 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 very few cards that have seen of the top 100 that have not been reprinted recently in a commander set. And so these get reprinted over and over and over, which leads to them seeing play over and over and over. And the cards that these kill are the cards that have been recently printed. So older cards, if they get a reprint in a commander set, it doesn't affect them as much sometimes if demand is there. Seems like Demonic Tutor is the most played card in commander that has not seen a reprint in quite some time, and that's why the card has just gone crazy in value. This is a list you should be very aware of, is the EDHREC top 100 cards. Where's the, I'd say revised is probably the cheapest Goblin Tutor, or the Demonic Tutor. You see the price of this is just a sense about the Shadow of Innistrad. The demand is definitely outstretched supply. It's doubled since the Oath of Gatewatch, which is huge for a price increase of a card. But you should definitely, this is something I use a ton, is you just go over to cards and top cards and go top cards. The thing that's a little bit confusing here is, like, Putrefy isn't the 15th most played card. It's just the percentage of decks that it's eligible in, it sees play in. And so these cards actually get hit the hardest because Wizards sees this and like, oh, so every green black deck they throw a Putrefy in. I am investing in English and Making, but it's a short-term investment. I'm selling before Commander. Well, I'm going to wait till the spoil of what the Commanders are for 2018, and if there is any sort of white-black combination, I will sell it. So that's kind of been my strategy with this, is not invest in any of these cards, because Wizards reprints them like crazy. They get reprinted and reprinted and reprinted and reprinted, and it's hard for them to go up in any sort of value before they get a reprint. So think Signature, think Secure Tribuilder, Lightning Greaves, that's a card that gets reprinted every set, Soul Ring. I am in on Cyclonic Rift, but again, it's a short-term investment. I'm selling them before the 2018 Commanders, as I just think it's too rich for my blood to keep an $8 card, or actually it's more of a $6 card. Card Kingdom's jacked the price up. In my investment portfolio, with it having a high chance of being reprinted. So yeah, so again, I think that a lot of this has to do with these cards just start to see a lot of play, because Wizards comes and checks out this list, and then they reprint it in another commander set, and then it of course sees more play. The feedback loop. Cards like Outer End are cards that I don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole, because Wizards has reprinted it. It was just barely out of cons. It had no chance to even go up in value, and they threw it in the most recent commander set. So anyway, it's good though to look down this list and you can see any, like Rhystic Studies, for example. Check out Rhystic Studies. Rhystic Studies was a card that has just slowly gone up over time and has never been reprinted. I don't know if it is about time for this card to be sold or not. I have a ton of these copies, but you can see, again, since Oath of the Gatewatch, it seems that Oath of the Gatewatch is a huge, this is when EDH really took off. Took off. And since then, it has gone from $3.50 all the way, so it's tripled in value. And I bet that this is true for all of these EDH cards that have not had a reprint. The top cards, let's just pick another one, see if we can find one that hasn't seen a reprint. Mirai's Wake was following that pattern until it was reprinted. Let's see here. Same thing with Phyrexian Arena. before it was reprinted, it was following that trajectory. Yeah, it's hard to find them. Supreme Verdict, here we go. Isn't this one an Iconic Masters, though? So Supreme Verdict should have seen a bit of a stop when it was spoiled. Yeah, so okay, so let's go back to Oath the Gatewatch. It was a $4 card, and it almost hit the double here. Why did it start going down here? Were people just afraid that it was going to be reprinted in... Oh, I think they did. I think they're afraid it was going to be reprinted in Modern Masters. And then when what wasn't reprinted in Modern Masters went back up again. So from about Oath, it's almost had a double up. And then it's going to go back down because it's an Iconic Masters. If you go down the list too, where's another one? The Aura Shards. Here's a perfect one too. Is Aura Shards. Isn't this one getting a reprint? I thought I saw Aura Shards somewhere. So since Oath the Gatewatch, it probably has seen a double up, at least. Oath the Gatewatch, $4. It's gone up to 12. Yep, so it's seen a triple up. So this is just across the board. Chromatic Lantern was going crazy before it got the reprint. Vandal Blast is a great one to pick up at the moment, other than it's susceptible to reprints. So I've been kind of targeting Vandal Blast. Haven't had any takers, though. Let's see here. I still like Avenger of Zendikar. Can you see, though, how many of these have been reprinted recently? Just, let's look at Oracle. See if Oracle is at a double up since Zendikar. All right, so about there, 17 to 20, but right before that, 13 to 20. Substantially has gone up since that time period. So I think there's your gems for cards. Always look at these spoiler lists of cards that are coming out, and you can make... Now you have a window that's open. We still need Explorers of Ixalan because there are going to be Merfolk, but Goblins, you know that a bunch of these Goblins aren't going to see a reprint until at least the Commander set of next year. I mean, there are a few other sets that are coming out. There's 25 that could have a bunch of cards. That's just a crapshoot. Iconic, I thought a lot of more of these popular cards to be reprinted, which they weren't. Iconic, of course, was Modern Masters 4. It was just a bunch of cards that needed to be reprinted for Modern, plus some very, very popular Commander cards. But anyway, that's my Market Monday list for today. Be careful with anything Return to Ravnica forward. Lately, I've been investing in a lot of cards off of this top 100 list that are pre-Return to Ravnica, especially pre-cons. And then you want to move them quickly, as I guarantee you Wizards is looking at this list, and then they see a card like, oh, this needs a reprint, let's throw it in. And cards that are, I like cards like Phyrexian Metamorph, for example. These are cards that are harder to reprint because of the Phyrexian mana is just miserable for Wizards to reprint. We also have From the Vault's Morph that's coming up, right? Or Transform, which people think is just going to be more transformation cards. I think Morph might be in it. Just anything that has any sort of transformation, like goes from one card to another, is going to be eligible. So that there's a lot of cards you need to be aware of that are going to be reprinted. There's the 2018 has a very, very high reprint year again. There are a lot of box sets that are coming out, a lot of unknowns that anything could be thrown in them. Again, we have the rare cards for Explorers of Ixalan, but we don't know some of the other cards that are being reprinted in Explorers of Ixalan. Just go and Google that. What are some main ones that are seeing a reprint? I'll check it out. Maybe we'll do it for another episode. Rogue Market. Good announcement about Rogue Market. We got a sponsor. So I'll be having the Rogue Market coming out later this week if I still have my voice before this cold takes it away. And it's going to be more of a high production video, so I'm working on that. And we'll probably be talking about rotation, Oath of Gatewatch specifically. So be looking forward to that. And if you can share it around and comment, I'd highly appreciate it, because I want to kind of wow my new sponsor for the video. Other than that, I appreciate everyone that stuck around with the Market Monday. Again, these type of videos are going to be more rambly. The Rogue Market's going to be more refined. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was information that is useful for your investment strategy. The key to Magic the Gathering is always stay one step ahead. Once a particular strategy is identified, then all the mass speculators get in on it. So like at first I made a killing off of Modern cards that like Inkmoth Nexuses, Fetch Lands, a lot of those cards. You can go back to my old school Rogue Market videos where I did some picks on Modern and invested in my very first cards in like Scars of Mirrodin and the Zendikar type cards. the cards that weren't eligible in Modern Masters 1. And I made a killing on that, but then it seems like everyone followed suit. And now I'm really focused on EDH, and maybe everyone's going to follow suit on that. And then we'll have to keep finding these hidden gems where people are not investing in. And that's where you want to be. So always try to stay one step ahead, and I hope I've done that for you for the Market Mondays. A lot of the reserve list cards are looking nice. All the ones that went up in value, it still, I think, is a great place to go in kind of these obscure observed lists. It seems like even though Magic has been pretty stagnant for the last year, stagnation sometimes isn't bad. So I think as many people have left the game, we've had many people join the game. My store, Magic is picking back up. It got scary there for a while, and even talking to the locals, a lot of stores, there's one chain here in Utah that has 5 franchises, and they started basically because of Magic. Like, Magic was their breadwinner. It was up to 50% plus. There are some of them that were saying that Magic was 80% of their sales, and the rest of their store was just piggybacking on Magic. Well, I talked to one of the store owners, and he says the Magic is down to 5 to 10% of his sales. It is completely dead. And that is very, very frustrating to hear that from one of the large chains here in Utah. I mean, Utah was a Magic was huge here in Utah. We had a very, very robust scene, competitive scene and casual scene for quite some time. But for me, for my store, and for what I've been hearing from other people, is Magic is starting to pick back up. For whatever reasons that's good news. Whenever a new influx of players comes into the game, that really outstretches a lot of these more obscure older cards. And I don't know, maybe I should rethink my Khans of Tarkir strategy. I went all in on a lot of those cards because I kind of looked at Dark Ascension and Innistrad and Scars of Mirrodin and tried to kind of follow the timelines of when those rotated cards started going up in value. And I mean, all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. I mean, look at Phyrexian Metamorph, for example, or some of those cards, Grand Architect, that saw very little play. I mean, well, Grand Architect was the perfect one, just need a home, and then just skyrocketed in value. And I had so many opportunities to buy that at bulk rare price, and I just didn't, and I'm kicking myself. So I vowed not to let that happen for Battle for Zendikar, Khans of Tarkir, Return to Ravnica, and none of those have done anything. I'm just sitting on so many cards that I don't know will ever go up, and then Wizards reprints them like Tidebinder Mage and Harbinger of Tides. But anywho, that's my own fault for, I guess, investing in cards that are very easy to reprint. Well, this has been Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder. If you enjoy these Market Monday videos, I highly encourage you to go sign up for Patreon. I do give out the kind of tweets on Patreon, the messages on whenever I think a card is going to go up. I'll give an alert on Patreon so you can get ahead of it before the price spike. As well as the money just goes to help support these type of videos. Also, we are pre-selling both Explorers of Ixalan, the dual deck, Goblins versus Merfolk, as well as the Iconic Masters. We try to stick around eBay prices for all of those, just to try to stay competitive and give all our viewers a really cheap price. And if you are going to buy from eBay, I highly suggest that you come check that out and just buy from me, because it does go to help the channel. We're still looking in on, a lot of people have talked about more of the kind of Gone Roger episodes, the live episodes at the store. All of those require a ton of equipment, and we're getting there. But it's expensive. It's very expensive running a kind of a YouTube channel and kind of upgrading the content as we go. Anyway, appreciate everyone. This has been Kevin with the Market Monday. Thanks for watching.